All right, what is going on, everybody? It's just me today. Chan is out. He's got a second Thanksgiving. I can barely handle one Thanksgiving. To have two is crazy, but he's out, so it's just me today. So it's going to be a shorter stream and probably more focused on how to use the sim tools. I think. Uh, I can vamp for a while, but it's probably more interesting if you guys see how I'm planning on using the tools. So just let me kind of get set up here. Let me fix the camera as well. There we go. Let's just do that. Okay. All right. So we got a nice little 10 gamer on DraftKings. Actually, let me tweet. I forgot to tweet. Damn it. Okay, let's see. Going on to talk about the Week 13 NFL slate and how to use our sim and opto tools. Boom. All right, we're good. Okay, so I like this slate. There's like 4-5 games that I'm really interested in stacking, and ownership is interesting to me. There's like a couple chalk plays that don't make a lot of sense to me. I mean, I get why people want to play them, but you will see in a second what I'm talking about. So the first game, the highest total of the week is Baltimore Philly. And the interesting thing is, highest total of the week by a couple points, 50.5 right now. No weather concerns that I've seen. It might be cold, but I haven't seen like any snow or anything, unlike the Buffalo game. And no ownership, despite this game having like all the best playmakers in the league. We have Jalen Hurts, AJ Brown, Saquon, all sub 10% ownership. We got Derrick Henry and Lamar sub 5% ownership. And, Zay Flowers is the highest owned player for this game. He's 6,200 receiver on DraftKings. I'm projecting him for 11% right now. If you're going to play Lamar stacks, it makes sense to go with Zay Flowers. He's fairly priced, 6,200. I can see it. I don't mind Rashad Bateman at 4,400. He gets a lot of the deep targets. And, he just needs to convert on a couple of them, and he's going to be a good stack partner for Lamar. Just overall, a good game. One I'm going to be loading up on, I think, because it doesn't seem like everybody else wants to. Everybody else wants to go on the games below. And, there's obvious reasons to want to play some of these lower games, but, I've talked all year about how Saquon has the best role in the league right now. They use him all 3 downs. Sometimes they bring in Kenneth Gainwell, but for the most part, it's Saquon. I like this game a lot. So we're going to be seeing how this one sims out, and I'm probably going to be trying to get some more of the stacks in the field's going to be getting to. Second game here, second highest total of the week is this Rams-Saints game. Now, this is where all the ownership is going, and there's reason. Rams, we all know where the usage is going, where the volume is going. It's going to be concentrated on the 3 at the top, Kyren, Puka, and Cooper Kupp. And they're pretty obvious stack partners for Matthew Stafford, so I get it. I'm going to be getting obviously to some of this game. We really see the ownership concentrate here on Alvin Kamara at 7,700. That's fine. He's been chalked for like 6 weeks in a row, and the usage is just always going to be there. The pass catching volume on DraftKings is always going to be there. Taysom Hill, 20% ownership at tight end, 5K. He had that huge game a couple weeks ago where he actually was catching passes out of nowhere. I can't do it. It's pretty tough. I mean, I get it, but if I get him in stacks with Carr, I guess. But I'm probably going to want to be like negatively correlating him with Kamara. I think they're going to be kind of vulturing touchdowns from each other. So for me, I'm not really a huge fan here at Taysom. Kamara at 30%, okay. I get it. DraftKings, the PPR volume is just so good for Kamara that I understand why he's getting this chalk, why he's getting his ownership. But, what on FanDuel especially, we can look at the FanDuel. Actually, let me open up a new tab here so we can see the FanDuel easier. Excuse me. FanDuel. Let's go ahead and just look at this just to confirm. FanDuel, I'm projecting him for, there we go. So just about the same ownership. Now there's 8,300 on FanDuel. If we look at comparable running backs here, let's go ahead and go back to running backs. So he's in there with like Kenneth Walker, Jonathan Taylor, Kyren is almost the same price, Bijan, and all these guys are lower on the Kamara. FanDuel is just so much more about touchdown volume that there's more reason, I think, to fade him on FanDuel at 33% own. I'm gonna like getting to all these guys. Cook, in the snow against the Niners defense that just hasn't been very good, especially since they lost. What's his name? The tackle they got from the Eagles a couple years ago. I'm just blanking on his name, but the run game just hasn't been there for the Niners, or for the run defense hasn't been there for the Niners. So I'm going to like Cook here. Basically, all these low-owned pivots away from Kamara I like on FanDuel. This is actually a week I'm going to be playing a lot more volume than normal in the large field stuff, like in the Sunday Millie. I'm going to be kind of attacking these large field. I just think this is a good week of GPP because there's all these games I want to stack up. So next game, as far as like the other receivers, I think Valdez-Scantling here at 2% owned, $4,500. I mean, he also is another guy that's going to get all the deep targets here for the Saints. And if you're fading some of this pass catching volume from Kamara and from Taysom Hill, I think it makes a lot of sense to go to MVS here. You know, it's he had a couple of long touchdowns a couple weeks ago. Carr is not afraid to throw a deep ball, so I like getting to MVS here as kind of like the leverage pivot off of some of these higher owned pass catchers from this game. Next game, we got this Chargers Atlanta game. Another one that I want to play a lot of. And we have the ownership here on Herbert on DraftKings. He's kind of the cash play, only 5,600 against a team that can't rush the passer. Obviously makes a lot of sense. And McConkey is getting kind of, he seems to be the receiver that's getting the ownership with Herbert. So like if people are just running the Herbert +1 stack, they're all just playing McConkey with him. The Chargers are out of healthy running backs right now. They have Gus Edwards and they have Kimani Vidal, who's kind of like the preseason darling. So, you know, no J.K. Dobbins means that there's probably going to be more pass volume for Herbert here. And this Atlanta team just hasn't been able to rush the passer. They finally are getting some of their corners healthy, which helps. But, you know, I'm still going to want to play a lot of this Charger passing game. And I think the way to do it, in my opinion, on DraftKings, with these ownerships, I don't mind playing into this Herbert quarterback ownership. But McConkey is probably the receiver I'm going to fade. McConkey's almost like his profile as a pass catcher is almost more like a tight end. He's getting kind of these like short to intermediate throws, and he just doesn't get the deep targets that you really need. The money line at 10 here looks like a bug on my end. That should be like probably like a +100 or +105, I'm guessing. But I'm gonna like. I mean, Quentin Johnson. Everybody just saw him show his ass on was it Sunday night that he played, and he dropped like all those passes. He dropped a drag route that probably would have gone for a 60-yard touchdown if he caught it. We've seen him get all these deep targets. We've seen him get these high value targets that we like for receivers, and he's getting no ownership. Nobody wants to play him. So I'm I'm gonna like playing Quentin Johnson, as gross as that sounds, and Joshua Palmer for that matter, at cheaper prices than McConkey and much lower ownership. I think that's a great way to double stack Herbert and play into the chalk here. So that's kind of what I'm going to be looking at here for the Chargers. And on the Falcons side, I mean, we kind of know the playmakers: Drake London, Bijan, Kyle Pitts, and Mooney has been really nice this year as a best ball and season-long fantasy guy. He also is kind of one of these high standard deviation plays we could see like relative to his salary. So like I'm gonna like Mooney. I like these players that are getting the deep balls for the Chargers, and I'm gonna probably end up be under on McConkey with Herbert stacks. As kind of weird as that sounds, you know, on DraftKings especially. On FanDuel, just looking at this game, excuse me, still got the stupid cough. On FanDuel, let's filter down. McConkey 33% on FanDuel, especially on FanDuel where touchdowns are everything. There's just no way I'm going to be playing 33% McConkey in my large field stuff. I'm probably going to try to get way under, either by lowering his projection, lowering his standard deviation, or just like forcing his exposure lower. I just feel like that's the right play on FanDuel, especially where you need touchdowns. And like these guys again, Quentin Johnson, almost the same price, and 1/30th of the ownership is Lad McConkey. I know it just is, nobody wants to play it, but you know, Herbert, he's got the huge arm. He can throw these deep balls. I'm going to like getting Quentin Johnson over McConkey in these large field tournaments. Now, in something like the $200, the Blitz, I'm also probably going to play a lineup or two. Now, obviously, we're going to probably want to play more into the chalk. We want to play more for floor in that type of contest. We don't need the huge ceiling like we need in the 80,000 entry contest. But still, I'm going to like playing Quentin Johnson. And I guess if it costs me, and McConkey gets like 12 catches for 180 yards, that's just bad luck. So next game here, we got Cincy Pittsburgh. This is kind of a tough one. Chase Brown is kind of the super chalk play on both sides. 43% projected right now is what I have him at on. Yeah, I like this too. Just basically any way I could think of to play the chalk Herbert while not playing chalk McConkey with him. Now, if you're playing like a Cousins, for example, if you're playing like a Cousins Mooney stack, which is like Cousins, just no ownership here, and you're playing Mooney with him, who also just doesn't have much ownership, I think that makes more sense to play McConkey running it back. But if I'm playing Herbert stacks, I'm going to do my best to either avoid playing McConkey as a one-off with him, or I'm going to be double stacking or triple stacking Herbert. Anyway, next game here, Bengals Steelers. Kind of a weird one because the Steelers defense has a reputation and they've been really good again. But I think there's reason to think that the Bengals are going to have success here. First of all, we just haven't seen anybody stop them all year long when Chase and Higgins have been healthy, especially. And this Steelers defense, they're top 5 right now in EPA per play. I'm kind of checking. I have to. This isn't working. Excuse me. You know, the success rate against the Steelers has actually been much better than against the other teams, kind of in the top 10 in EPA against the pass. So I just think we're going to see Burrow and Chase have success here. And Chase especially is kind of the pivot. He's super expensive on DraftKings, 8,600. But I just think against the Steelers defense, he's the receiver that if the Bengals have success, he's the guy that's going to be the catalyst of that. You know, the Steelers run a lot of single high man coverage, and that's the kind of stuff that Chase just absolutely obliterates. You know, Higgins is better against kind of the zone coverage and more of like the too high stuff where he can hit on these intermediate routes. Chase is the guy they run short stuff for. They run the deep balls for the stuff that he can get one-on-one against the corner and make a play. 6% ownership, and you can get him as leverage off of the super chalky Chase Brown and T Higgins. I like that idea a lot. I'm going to be over on Chase for sure. And on the Steelers side, you know, if the Steelers are going to have offensive success here, it's going to be through the running game and probably through deep balls to Pickens. So, I mean, Najee and Jalen Warren are kind of splitting the carries here, but I think I'm going to want to be a little over on Najee and a little over on Pickens. It's not exciting. Najee is just not an exciting player to play, and he's killed me this year on FanDuel where I'm just praying he gets touchdowns and he just hasn't delivered for me. But I like getting to some of these Steelers pieces. This Pickens and Najee especially, I think, are the two that if I'm running Burrow stacks, those are the two bring backs I'm going to have. And you could play Russ at 5,700. I mean, just compare Russ at 5,700 versus Herbert at 5,600 on DraftKings. You know, it's pretty hard to go, I want to play Russell Wilson, but you play him and Pickens together, it's going to be a very low stack. You know, it's just not one that's going to have a super high, very high success rate. Let's see what else. Oh, accidentally just knocked Jalen Warren. Let's not do that. Let's go ahead and just reset our data here because I did that on FanDuel. This game, we again have the Chase Brown ownership, the T Higgins ownership. Steelers defense is getting ownership on FanDuel. They're cheap, so I get it. But I just think there's going to be points here. You know, I think this game's going a little undervalued by the market and by Vegas in general. So I'm going to be looking to be under on the Bengals defense, under on these guys, and over on Chase, over on some of these Steelers playmakers. You know, the nice thing about the Steelers is they're kind of the Rams get a lot of ownership because we know where the volume is coming from. We kind of do too with the Steelers. It's just not as fun to play, right? We know that it's going to be a lot of deep balls to Pickens. We know it's going to be Najee and Warren running the ball a lot. And so we have concentrated volume here. It's just nobody wants to play them because they just aren't the same names. They aren't in a dome. And this is a divisional game too. So people probably are just thinking the classic second divisional game under, which, you know, is always possible. But I do think this game is probably going a little undervalued right now. Let's go ahead and reset the data so that way when I run a sim here in a second, I don't break everything. All right. Next game up on the board. Scrolling down, we got Tampa, Carolina. Now, about 5 or 6 weeks ago, we all would have said this is going to be Tampa wins by 40, but Carolina has no chance with Bryce Young. But Bryce Young has played a lot better the last few weeks. You know, I've been impressed by him ever since he got unbenched because Dalton got in a car wreck, which is kind of like a weird situation. But he's been much, much better. They almost beat the Chiefs last week. He's taking off of the ball a little bit more, which makes him kind of interesting as like a very cheap value option. This Tampa defense can't get pressure on the quarterback, which helps him a lot. And we see the ownership here going to Chuba, which is not not fun to me. I there's just lots of reasons to see Chuba failing here, even though this game they do have a 20 total team total, 46.5 game total. He's been pretty good the last few weeks, but like Jonathan Brooks is finally healthy, right? And they spent, I think it was a second round pick on him in the draft. And you don't spend a second round pick on a running back if you aren't planning on using him, unless you're John Lynch, which they've done with running backs over and over again. R.I.P. Trey Sermon. But Chuba as chalk at 6,700 at running back. If we compare similar values to him or similar salaries to him at running back, we got James Conner on DraftKings, Aaron Jones, all these guys again, right? Jonathan Taylor again. All these guys here, I think, are viable pivots. I would say Pollard, maybe not as much with Tyjae Spears back. But I just think I'm probably going to end up being under on Chuba. I just think there's a lot of ways for him to fail on DraftKings and over on FanDuel. I believe it's the same story. Let me find that game where it went. Why am I missing that game on FanDuel? Am I crazy? Let's zoom around and see if we can find it. I don't know why the game's not showing up. Oh, there it is. I got it. All right. On FanDuel, I believe it's the same deal. Yeah, Chuba 24% on FanDuel, 7,400 salary. Definitely one I'm going to be getting. Under on FanDuel. I just think there's Bucky Irving, for example, at 1/3 the ownership on FanDuel for basically the same price. I'm much more bullish on Tampa's ability to move the ball on the ground than I am Carolina's, first of all. And also, I just think Bucky Irving's a better running back than Chuba Hubbard. Chuba Hubbard was actually like a great college running back, but I just don't think he has the same upside as Bucky Irving. We've seen how elusive Bucky Irving can be. He ended up with like 28 fantasy points last week, and it seriously could have been like 45 against the Jets. He was tackled at the 1 yard line twice. I had his anytime touchdown, and it was just tilting my face off. That first couple of quarters, but then he finally got there in the end. So yeah, I like Bucky Irving here at that ownership on FanDuel, especially as a pivot off of Chuba. It just makes too much sense. And talk about the Panthers passing game. Like I said, Bryce Young has been much better the last few weeks. Very, very cheap on both sides. Also, just completely unknown here. This Tampa defense, also, like I said, just hasn't been able to get pressure on anybody. The corners aren't very good. They're beat up still. I do think Carolina's going to be able to move the ball through the air. And as a result, we're seeing on DraftKings this David Moore chalk. Let me pull that up again. This David Moore chalk he's kind of like every week we've seen this chalk cheap receiver. This week, 22% on right now projected. I have on DraftKings, less chalky on FanDuel. You just don't need the salary, I don't think. There's cheap receivers, right? Leggett, 5,800. But everybody wants to play David Moore. I'll probably end up being under. I mean, he's a journeyman receiver who's never really had much success. He has one game of good targets. And this Panthers team just isn't devoid of receiving talent anymore with Thielen back. Coolers in the chat talked about Leggett here. Leggett actually does have game-breaking upside as a receiver. We saw it at South Carolina. We've seen him in flashes be able to break big plays. So I definitely agree here. I like Leggett as kind of you got to pay up on DraftKings, right? 1,600 more than David Moore on DraftKings. But I just think you were going to be able to find value anyways on this slate, in my opinion. I don't think we need to be going dumpster diving with David Moore at ownership. So I am going to be over on the Panthers passing game, under on David Moore, under on Chuba, and probably over on Bucky Irving. And also the Tampa side, Baker Mayfield has been great this year. I've been really, really impressed. They've had so many injuries on offense, and it just hasn't mattered. It hasn't mattered who's catching passes. They've still been able to move the ball. Mike Evans is finally back. He looks good here. This Panthers defense hasn't been able to stop anybody all year long. I don't see them being able to stop the Buccaneers here. So I'm going to like the passing game. I like Bucky Irving. Tough thing here is really figuring out what to do with the running backs. What do you do with Bucky and Rachaad White? And they even just absolutely tilted me last week with Sean Tucker. He's not in play at all, but I do think we got to make a decision here with Irving and Rachaad White. You can't play both, even though they're both kind of fairly affordable. I'm going to be preferring the Bucky side, but I think in Baker stacks, Rachaad White makes more sense. He's kind of more of the pass catching running back. And I think you could do some weird Baker stuff here with Baker, Otten, Evans, Baker, White, and Evans, for example, and bring it back with a Leggett, bring it back with an Adam Thielen. I just don't want to be doing like a Bryce, David Moore kind of stack. I just think you're playing into, I guess if you're playing Bryce, you're okay on ownership, but just these David Moore one-offs, in my opinion, just aren't the move. these chalky receivers haven't come through all year long, and I just think we're going to find value at receiver if we kind of look at some of these receivers that are in play. Dortch, no. But Kendrick Bourne, okay. I could see it. The Patriots have been rotating the receivers all year long. There's one, A.D. Mitchell is kind of the one that, as a pivot off of David Moore, he's also getting ownership, but he has a good role right now. He kind of slots in wherever the Colts need him. He doesn't play the slot, but he'll slot in for Pittman or for Pierce. And he actually has talent. Sorry, David Moore, but he's got like a big receiving talent, in my opinion. He flashed it at Georgia. He's flashed it so far this year. So if I'm playing one of these cheap receivers, he's the one I'm going to play on DraftKings. Christopher says, just find out for the Sims. Thanks for doing content as well. Yeah, no problem. Yeah. This is going to be a short one talking about the games. I'm going to kind of show you how I'm going to be using the Sims on FanDuel tomorrow here in a second. So that's enough of that game. There any other ones? Let's scroll down here. Vikings Cardinals game in a dome. This Cardinals offense, they've not been nearly as good of a team to play as you would think. Just the reputation with Kyler, Marvin Harrison Jr., Connor McBride. These are big names, but they just haven't been a good offense to play as a team. The Vikings are kind of the same story. Justin Jefferson, Aaron Jones, Addison, all big names, all huge ceilings, but just been tough to kind of stack. And Darnold has cooled off after the start being the year. Arizona's defense has also been kind of underrated. I like name-wise, they just don't have any big names, but Jonathan Gannon has proven that he can call defenses. And I want to play Jefferson. I want to play Addison, but it is kind of tricky a little bit against this Arizona defense. They've been much better than you would think. And same with Aaron Jones. Kind of same story here. Like I want to play him, but it's tough. It's tough to just this Arizona defense has been good. We saw them last week again against Seattle, shut down Seattle. They shut down the Niners. So shut down the healthy Niners, I guess, when they had Ayuk. They shut them down in the second half at least. Marvin Harrison Jr. has killed me all year long. I keep thinking this is the week, and every week it's just been disappointing. This Vikings defense has been really good with Brian Flores. I don't think this is the week. I mean, God, it probably will be the week now that I say that. At some point, though, he's just too good. There's just no way you can tell me that Marvin Harrison Jr. is just going to be this big bust in the NFL. I just refuse to believe it. I'm probably going to go to the grave thinking I'm going to be buying up property on Marvin Harrison Island for my entire career probably, and then we'll just get multiple hurricanes over and over again. I'll have to keep rebuilding, but at some point it's going to happen for Marvin Harrison Jr. Probably not this game though against the Vikings. Trey McBride has been the focal point of the Cardinals our Cardinals passing game all year long. So absolutely, as a tight end, you could play him. I think at 10% ownership, I'd rather play that than Taysom, unless I'm doing some kind of weird car stuff. Hawkinson is also getting ownership at tight end at 4,400. It's okay. He got a little more usage last week, if I remember right. So is Coker back? I don't think he's back, is he? I mean, the Cokeheads can rejoice if he's back, because as a pivot off of David Moore, that makes a lot of sense to me. They were trying to get Coker the ball a lot before he got hurt. On the Viking side, Hawkinson is kind of the chalky player here. Jefferson always has elite upside. Excuse me. Oof. Jefferson always has elite upside. And yet again, I mean, last week he had a big touchdown called back. You can always play Justin Jefferson. Absolutely no problem with that. He's not my favorite of the kind of 8,000 plus receivers. Jamar Chase is, but if I get Justin Jefferson in the lineups, I'm absolutely fine with that. He's like, he's one of the few guys in the league you just can't really stop. Him and Chase and a couple other players. We've seen Addison have a huge ceiling. He's kind of the guy when teams bracket Jefferson. He's the guy that gets left alone. He does have a lot of talent. Biletnikoff winner at Pitt, went to USC. Or actually, did he win the Biletnikoff at USC or Pitt? I don't remember, but he was just elite in college. He's shown game-breaking upside. He can catch multiple touchdowns. Even in games where the Vikings don't score very much, he has that upside. He's a guy that I'll probably be adjusting his standard deviation a little bit, just to kind of see what happens if I give him like an 8, for example. I think I don't know if I want to be game stacking this. I don't know if I'm going to be running like Darnold double stacks here, but I do like getting pieces from Minnesota, especially. That's about it for this game. Connor, you can always play even against this defense. He's again, him and McBride are kind of the way that the Cardinals like to run the ball or move the ball, so I don't mind it. But not my favorite running back play. He obviously makes sense as a pivot off some of these higher owned running backs. Washington, Tennessee. Washington's offense has kind of been disappointing last few weeks. They were bad in the first half against the Cowboys and then just exploded. They had that miracle play against. I don't want to relive it. Poor white flavored. Our friend in the chat, R.I.P. Man, that was tough. He had a Circus Survivor entry. Had it on. Oh wait, he had it on. No, I'm talking about the wrong game. He had it on Houston. When I'm talking about this, there was a video of these guys in. I think it was a Circus Sportsbook, and they had Washington as their survivor pick. And the implied equity last week, I think of all survivor entries, like 150 grand. And all these guys had Washington. They were cheering him on. They get that Hail Mary to McLaurin, which saved everybody's day who stacked up Daniels and missed the extra point. There goes the survivor entry. Absolutely brutal beat for those guys. This Titans offense has shown upside. And we get Tyjae Spears back, who's another playmaker for them to use. That does hurt Pollard. I don't mind getting pieces from this game. I don't mind stacking this game. I mean, this Washington offense, they've been kind of meh for a few weeks now, but as we saw in the second half last week, they can always explode. Daniels loves taking deep shots, which is huge for the upside of an offense. So I don't really mind even though this game does have a 44.5 total, assuming weather is fine here, I don't mind playing Ridley with some Daniel stacks. I think that makes a lot of sense. McLaurin, again, is just unowned. And yet again, we see that he has game-breaking upside. At 1% owned on DraftKings, I don't mind taking shots there. Titans defense on FanDuel. Yeah, we can look at that in a second. Are they low price? Pollard, for me, is kind of off the board now at Spears back. Spears, all-time leading rusher still in college football history, which is pretty incredible. With him back, he's not going to – Pollard just doesn't have that RB1 volume anymore, so probably off the board for me. If I'm playing anybody from this Titans offense, it is probably just Ridley. You can do Westbrook-Ikine, who keeps catching touchdowns. Like, teams, for whatever reason, decide they don't want to cover Westbrook-Ikine, and he gets wide open for 70-yard touchdowns every week, it feels like. So you can play him, but that's very thin. You're hoping for yet again another team to break down in the secondary. Looking over on FanDuel now, because our buddy Lemons just talked about the Titans defense. Where is that game? There it is. Titans defense. Where are they? Tennessee Titans, 8% owned, 3,300, very cheap. As a pit, we saw the higher owned defense. Who was that? I don't remember who it was. Was it the Steelers or maybe the Chargers? Somebody's defense was very high owned at 3,400. So as a pivot away from that, I don't mind it. Especially if you're kind of playing the narrative here that Washington's offense is a little overrated right now, even though they did have that big second half last week. It was the Bengals defense. Yeah. So you have the Bengals, Jaguars, Panthers, and Falcons. All these teams getting ownership here, and you could pivot with the Titans. That's fine. That's fine. Yeah, Naked Daniels is a way to play this, right? He has the rushing upside. Still kind of unsure how badly his ribs are injured right now. That's like really unclear. It seemed like he was more willing to take off last week. I don't know his exact rushes, but just kind of like eye test wise, didn't seem to be bothering him that much, but it is something we do kind of have to keep an eye on here. Rib injuries are absolutely killers for quarterbacks, as we've seen with Justin Herbert last couple of years. I don't mind playing Naked Daniels here. We can kind of test that in the Sims and see how that goes. And, it's not like when you play Daniels alone, you're not playing into ownership, right? 5% on DraftKings. And it's not like you're losing out on ownership with some of these guys. Now, Hurts, 11% ownership. He's a safety valve for Jaden Daniels. But I do kind of think that Ertz also hurts the upside of Daniels as far as a rusher, right? Because Ertz is taking these little short intermediate routes that's kind of the plays where you would expect Daniels to take off, right? Instead of a 6-yard pass to Ertz, maybe he rushes for 6 yards. So, yeah, I don't mind that call of Naked Daniels. And we could test that in the Sims and see how it plays out. And another thing we can do, I guess, we could also go into here and jump into our correlations. And we have these custom correlations that these are calculated from, I believe when I did this, it was last 5 years of data, so 2019 through 2024. These are just the average correlations for all teams. And you can absolutely, so we have these defaults set up. And so like you could change this to be like 0.2 for Daniels, save it, and you could just say like commies, right? And now I can always reference this preset as the commies correlation. So for Daniels here, I want the commies. There we go. So I'd have these custom correlations. So that's also one way to do it. And we can try that out in the sim and see how that looks here in a second. So next game, keep going down. We got this Houston-Jacksonville game. Now, Nico Collins is back, thank God. Texans are just kind of unwatchable without him. As good as Stroud was last year, he just hasn't been quite the same so far this year. I don't know what the deal is with them. I don't know if it's like an offensive philosophy thing where they're just so committed to Joe Mixon that they just are afraid to unleash Stroud like they did last year. I don't know if it's just because their defense is so good they feel like they should just run the ball and shorten these games up a little bit. But I do think there's a little more upside here with the Stroud Collins than maybe the field is projecting. And Collins again at 7,900 as a pivot away from some of these high expensive players that are getting a lot of ownership. I really don't mind that. I think Collins right now, if he's not the best receiver in the league, he's top 3 or top 5, just an elite playmaker. And he's only 10% owned, right? Relative to some of the other plays in the 8,000s, not a bad look, in my opinion. This Jags defense, just not very good. Doug Peterson just still hanging on here. How is he not fired? Like, am I crazy? He's still coaching, right? Like, he's still the guy. Even after that atrocious loss to he's still the coach of the Jaguars. I just can't believe it. Like, I had to look that up. It's so unbelievable that he's still coaching. He's just been so bad ever since he won the Super Bowl. Like, what about Doug Peterson? It's like, we have to keep him around. I guess if we just don't want to fire him early. I mean, the Shah Khan doesn't want to pay the tax, I guess, of firing a coach too early. But I do think there might be some more points here than we're projecting. Trevor Lawrence is back, which obviously helps the Jags offense. I think Stroud and Collins doubles are viable this week, which sounds kind of weird on a slate with like some really good games at the top end. But I do think that's in play here. We could test that in the Sims as well. And obviously, you can always play Joe Mixon as a pivot away from Kamara. I think it makes a ton of sense, especially on FanDuel. He's got him, Barkley. I talk about this all the time. Him, Barkley, McCaffrey. Although McCaffrey's been kind of weird since returning from injury. They have the best roles in the league, playing every down almost, just getting as many touches as they can handle. So if you want to play Mixon here and fade some of the high-owned chalk or the high-salary chalk, makes a ton of sense to me on this slate. On the Jag side, we're actually getting ownership here on BT Jr. and Ingram. With Lawrence back, I don't mind that chalk, actually. This Texans defense has been pretty good this year, so there is some risk there, but I do wonder how unowned, how owned this game is going to be, right? We see the ownership on some of these guys. Like, is this going to be ownership as stacks? Clearly not, right? Because Lawrence right now, 1% owned, basically. So it's not like people are rushing to stack up this game. All these guys are going to be one-off. So if we're going to play these guys, I really like it as a game stack or like a Stroud double, bring it back with BT Jr. or with Ingram, or even getting wild with a Lawrence double. I really don't mind that way to play the slate either. I like this game kind of relative to the total. I do think with Lawrence back, we do see a little more upside. Let's see, Colts Pats. Another game where low total, but again, there's some offensive upside here. Anthony Richardson, everybody kind of shout on him just like they did Bryce Young earlier in the year. Then he came back after being benched, and he's looked much better. He still has a problem where anything short, he has a hell of a time completing a pass. But if it's a deep route, he's much more likely to complete it, it feels like, which is just wild for a quarterback. And he just has one default mode of throwing the ball 80 miles an hour, it's like Brett Favre on steroids. Brett Favre, if Brett Favre was athletic, I think would be the real comparison here. 50% ownership is tough for me. I know he's 5,500, $100 less than Herbert on DraftKings. I mean, sure. Richardson playing with Pittman, playing with AD Mitchell, I don't mind at all as kind of the value receiver. If you played the Richardson, AD Mitchell, you can play anybody else you want in the slate, right? You could play Richardson, AD Mitchell. You could damn near play Collins and Chase in that lineup and be okay. Close to the chalk defense on DraftKings. I get it. Drake May, rookie quarterback. But the Patriots offense has shown life. They struggled last week, but they have shown life with Drake May. Drake May as the pivot away from Richardson for basically the same price and, way less ownership. I also don't mind that. This Colts defense isn't much to write home about. And Drake May has shown an ability to run, which obviously gives a quarterback a floor. So I don't mind that. Now the problem with Drake May is who do you stack him with? You stack him with Hunter Henry. Austin Hooper was the one who caught the deep ball last week on like 4th and 14 or whatever that was. So you could do that, I guess, if like the cheap tight end option, but it's not very exciting. We could test another thing we could test here is Drake May naked in the Sims. We could see how that looks. Just unstack Drake May. Like what if you kind of took Cooler's idea earlier of Daniels unstacked, and instead of doing Daniels, what if you did Drake May unstacked and ran it back with Michael Pittman or AD Mitchell? Josh Downs is out for this game, which I didn't mention, which also helps the floor on these receivers. He's the man beater for the Colts offense. He's kind of the guy that they rely on third downs. So without him, I do wonder a little bit about their ability to move the ball. But this Patriots defense, it's not like they're going to be shutting anybody down anytime soon. So, this game also is absolutely viable to play. It's kind of a weird slate where there's like 4 or 5 really good games to stack, but then even these low total ones are kind of interesting. Let's look at FanDuel for this one. Actually, you know what? I didn't even talk about this, the Jags game on FanDuel. So let's look at that really quick. So we have Ingram, kind of the same story on as DraftKings. Ingram getting kind of ownership here at tight end. Ownership at tight end is kind of flat this week. It's like everybody's kind of around 10 to 15, 20% on DraftKings, and it seems that way on FanDuel as well. And yet again, Nico Collins, 9,100, obviously expensive, but 4% ownership, pretty tempting, right? Pretty tempting. Tough to stack him and Stroud, obviously, 8,000, 9,100, but that's an interesting way to get different here against a bad Jags defense. So I don't mind that. The Patriots game. So Hunter Henry is the chalk. Is chalk on FanDuel also. Sure. There's a lot of ways you can play tight end this week. I don't think you need to play 2 tight ends. I think there's enough value that we don't need to. So, if I get Hunter Henry in like a Drake May stack, that's okay. And AD Mitchell has the value. Sure. 12% owned. That's fine. Kind of similar ownership on DraftKings. Jonathan Taylor, 7,900, getting 16% ownership. I don't really have much of an opinion there. It's kind of like he's an elite talent at running back. He can break any slate that he's on. And this Patriots defense, like I said, is just not very good. So, he could be the guy. And without Josh Downs, that's one less like playmaker that they'll have to rely on. So maybe that means it opens up some pass catching for Taylor as well. So there's reasons to play this game. Richardson just isn't getting ownership on FanDuel. He's a little more expensive relative. DraftKings and FanDuel salaries are annoying to compare, but 7,800 as a quarterback. Compare that to Drake May here at 6,800. There's more reason to play Richardson, I guess, on FanDuel. I've been playing him as with one-offs or as a naked since he came back in the lineup, and I don't mind that here, Richardson. So at this ownership on FanDuel. DraftKings is a little dicier at his ownership. Anything else? Demario Douglas at 5,600, sure, as a play, that's okay. The Patriots are just frustrating because the targets kind of flip a coin here about who's going to get the targets this week between Henry, Douglas, Bourne, and Booty. So, one of these guys, if you're stacking May, one of these guys probably figures to go off, but pretty tough to say who, and probably tough to say multiple will. So May feels like a quarterback you're going to want one, and that's it, or none. What's left? God, this awful Seahawks Jets game. This Jets team, I've been telling my dad, like, some of these teams, it's like if you could just have them do the Madden simulate to end the season, some of these teams would be taking that, no questions. That's like the Jags probably would be. The Jets are another team at this point. Like, there's just nothing left for them to play for now. Like, I suppose there's a, 1 in a million chance they could still make the playoffs, but it's highly unlikely. This season is pretty much over for them. Just completely lost season after a lot of preseason hype. Breece Hall. Do we want to play Breece Hall? Seahawks defense has improved a lot last few weeks. They've gotten healthy finally on the defensive line, which has helped. So it's pretty tough to say, like, okay, Breece Hall, he's got the upside, but as a floor play, there's lots of reasons to think that Seahawks are going to go in there and kind of shut the Jets offense down like the Bucs did last week. So yeah, tough. Really, like, this game is pretty ugly. This is one, like, I just can't see myself stacking too much of this game. Now, the one argument for playing this game is if the Jets move the ball, the volume is so concentrated on Wilson, Adams, and Hall that you figure one of them is going to be, if they score, let's say 20, if they hit their team total of 21 points, score 3 touchdowns, then one of these players is going to end up being the guy, right? Somebody's going to be getting the volume here. It's just tough to say who. And as one-offs, it's okay. As stacks, pretty tough. Not going to be stacking Aaron Rodgers. And same for Geno. The Seahawks have a high PROE still, but they're just so slow. They've been slow paced all year long, and they don't really have an incentive here to kind of speed things up. And like, it's not like the Jets are really going to be pushing them. Jets also are going to be super slow. So 42 totals feels about right here, even though we might see some offensive production. We do have playmakers here, with Kevin Walker, Metcalf. JSN's been awesome the last few weeks, and we do have the playmakers for the Jets. But, despite all the names, just a tough one to see like, a 35-31 type of game like we could see with some of these other games. Any more games? I think the last one is just this Niners-Bills. My poor Niners, speaking of a team that might want to simulate to the end of the year. This is it for them. If they lose this game, it's over. And, they have a better chance now with Brock Purdy back, obviously. And also just the weather creates a little more uncertainty, obviously, in how the Buffalo Bills offense is going to perform. Never worried about how Josh Allen is going to do. Do we see the Josh Allen engagement narrative? Is he going to let us down here? You got engaged over the bye week. Is he going to be a little unfocused for this Niners team that is just like desperate for their season? As a Niners fan, I hope so, but I wouldn't bet on it. Khalil Shakir getting ownership on FanDuel at 6,200. Excuse me. Snow. We'll see what the weather is actually going to be like at kickoff. I'm not really sure here. I have to look it up. Assuming it's clear and it's just like this, all the snow hit earlier in the day. Yeah, sure. 6,200 Khalil Shakir. He is kind of the engine of the offense when they aren't running the ball with James Cook. So yeah, why not? Now, if it's like blizzard conditions during the game, 21% on, I don't want to be under that. And I'm going to want to play more James Cook, I think, than the field in general. I like the Cook look, so to speak, at 3% ownership on FanDuel. I think that makes a lot of sense with bad weather. Niners' just run defense just hasn't been very good. No Nick Bosa still, I believe. His hip is still messed up. So tough to see in good conditions this Niners defense stopping the Bills. And so it's going to be somebody, right? It's going to be Josh Allen. It's going to be Shakir, or it's going to be James Cook. Somebody from this offense you figure is going to go off. On the Niners side, McCaffrey came back from the bye, and everybody's excited about them. He's got a great role still. They haven't really been willing to play that much Jordan Mason, even though like Jordan Mason has, in my opinion, looked better running the ball than McCaffrey has so far this year. But as a pivot off of some of the higher owned running backs and the high salary players, I don't mind it. We'll see about the weather. This is, like I said, if last week wasn't the Niners season, this week is the Niners season, right? This is it for them. If they have anything left in the tank, this is the game they got to go all in on. Debo, I keep playing him. Like, I don't know. Maybe he really is to watch. He's one of my favorite players. My favorite Niner of this era. Him and Fred Warner, I guess. It's tough as a fan to say like this guy's washed, but when is he going to show something? Without Ayuk, he's kind of been the zone beater all his entire career for them, and Ayuk has been the man coverage beater. At some point, Debo has to show something. They were trying to force him the ball last week, and he just was killing poor Brandon Allen, who I was very bearish on last week, and just did not look good, and he just did not get helped out by Debo. Maybe this is the week, right? We've seen the Niners in these kind of cold weather, bad weather games, a willingness to give Debo these more carries, more underneath stuff. I remember that divisional game against the Packers when it was like -10 or whatever, and they were just force feeding him carries, and he just carried that team to the NFC Championship. So always a chance, I guess, but at 1% as a fan, I'll probably be getting a little over that. I'll probably force exposure to Debo, but as like a neutral observer here, I can't really recommend it. He just has the ceiling, right? He always has the ceiling as a player where he can get there and especially that ownership, if you want to. I'll be doing it. I'll be playing 5 to 10% probably, but it's just a tough click. Jawan Jennings is back, and with Purdy back, Jawan Jennings is way more viable. He's a safety blanket for Purdy, especially with Ayuk out. He's the guy that gets all the third down looks. He is the new man coverage beater for the Niners, and he's been great this year. By far his best year as a Niner. He had a great game in the Super Bowl, and he carried that over to the season. With Purdy back, you can do it, but it's just all weather dependent here. And this Bills defense has been very good, especially the last few weeks. They've been excellent. So I just hope the Niners find a way to win this game. Shanahan, like if you ever had the one last game plan to get some points on the board, please bring it on Sunday night. Please, as a fan, I'm begging you. I kind of wish I wore my Jerry Rice jersey to be keeping the bull case here for the Niners offense. But anyway, so that's about it for the individual games. I really think this is probably, I said this kind of earlier. This is, I think, last week I hated last week's slate. This week, I think this is a fun slate to MME. I'm going to be playing on FanDuel only, and I'm going to be MMEing some of this stuff. The $3 for sure. Probably get some lineups in the 15 and maybe one or two in the blitz. I just think this is a fun one. Lots of different ways you can attack it, and ownership concentrating on in ways that's like leaving some of my the best players in the league, the best playmakers in the league, underowned in my opinion. So let's kind of show how we can sim this stuff. Let's do the blitz. So any kind of questions here, I'll kind of leave it up to the chat if anybody wants to talk about the slate. Without Chan here, it's kind of like I can run through this stuff pretty quick. And happy to take people's opinions and kind of any questions about how to use the sims or the optimizer. One thing, so I showed the correlation stuff. So we could just do an example. So let's just run one here in the blitz. 5,000. Actually, let's go ahead and run the 555 million on DraftKings as well. So I have all these presets right for my configs. Let's go ahead and do. We'll just run like this. We'll set up so I usually set my ROI a little lower. I want lineups that can win, lineups that I want to kind of reduce ROI by a little bit and look at ownership and lineups that can win. These hiccups. When I'm setting up projections, I usually filter out when I upload them to the site. I usually filter out below 2 projection. I leave these in just in case you're playing a the afternoon only or something. You need some of these the lower projected guys. But obviously no ownership going to them. So I usually just change the projection minimum to 2. So minimum salary 49,000 is probably fine. Now there's an argument that we should just move this up, and especially on a slate like this where there's a lot of well projected plays, we don't really need to save salary to get different, in my opinion. So we could argue to move this up a little bit. So these percent of stacks, this is probably fine. These numbers are calibrated based on the large field stuff, but in my experience, these numbers are okay for these 5,000 plus entry contests are fine. So no players versus defense is good. So we'll run this one, and we'll set up the same thing here on FanDuel, just an 80, 10, 10. Oops, not 80, 110. And then 2, and we'll do this, and 0. Excuse me. So something that I talk about quite a bit, and you'll hear other sites talk about this too. I think ETR, on some of the shows they talk about testing the sims and testing certain builds. So quickly, how we can do that, and I tried to show this with NBA, but it was broken at the time, is we can use the optimizer and bring those lineups into the sim. So let's say, for example, Coolers had this idea. Daniel's unstacked and then Ridley from the other side. So one thing we could do is we could build, let's turn on double TE just in case, and we could build a rule, at least 2, right? And we could say Daniels, and we could say Ridley, right? So we could do that. And what we're also going to do is team limit 1, Washington. Where are they? There they are. So now what this is saying is, okay, max 1 Washington, but we're already forcing in Daniels. So we should only get 1 player from Washington. That should only be Daniels, right? So we can run, let's run 100. 100 is probably fine. And let's set projection minimum to 2. And this is FanDuel, by the way. Randomness at 100 is probably okay for this. This is just an experiment. So we'll call this naked Daniels, right? plus Ridley. We can do this just so we know what we're doing. Save. And let's go ahead and run this. It shouldn't take very long. And so this could take a minute. We got our sims running here. Excuse me. These are almost done. Okay. So let's go ahead and grab all 100 of our optimizer lineups. So we have all 100, right? All Daniels. And we do have some Washington sneaking in here. Chan, what's up with your filters, my buddy? So I wonder if the limit filter is actually applying to not the quarterback, would be my guess. Something we could do is stack here. We could export these, for example, and just remove these QB1, right? So how to read these stack on the optimizer side, QB plus number of skill position players with the QB, then this pipe, and then after the pipe is the number of bringbacks. So QB plus one bringback, right? QB, this one would have 2 bringbacks from the other team. So this would be Ridley and probably Tyjae Spears. Interesting Tyjae Spears. So we could do that. So let's one way to do this would be, let's go ahead and just, that's kind of annoying that I can't filter on this. So once we get the optimizer, so we have our entries figured out. We'll pretend like we're playing 100. One way to do this would be, sim these entries, right? And we click this, brings us to our sim. All of our stuff is now automatically set up for you. So there we go. Now we choose the contest. We could do it that way. Actually, yeah, let's just go ahead and do it that way. So let's find our, what was it called? Blitz. So let's find our blitz. And we're going to use the same preset we just did. So 80, 10, 10, 10. And all this stuff is the same. So let's just call this like FD default or something. So we can save this preset. We don't have to do it again. And then let's also adjust. So first, let's just run one. So we could import recent here. Oops. What happened to my correlations? We could import recent here and bring in our Daniels correlation. But let's just leave it with default correlations for now. So you can see, oops. We want to cancel that. Let's bring in Jaden Daniels. So we can see our correlations here. And see, now we do have commies saved. Actually, import recent would be if I hit add correlation and then I ran a job, then it would show up in here. So these are the defaults right now. You can see, like for Jaden Daniels, these probably aren't the best, right? 0.36. I think 4for4 has a tool that'll pull the correlations for you. I'm also going to do a show on Thursday the 5th that is going to, maybe it's Friday. That is going, I'm going to do this for NBA, but I'll show you how to like hit the NBA API and calculate correlations yourself. So you can kind of have like a running script. I always just leave these at defaults for the users. The thing is, like, I don't want to mess with these correlations too much. Just like as a user, with like just blindly like doing this in the background without telling you what's going on just doesn't feel like a great way to do it. So I'd rather have like the user adjust correlations. Now, if there's like if everybody wants me to adjust correlations on the back end for each quarterback, we could talk about that. But for now, kind of leaving it to you guys to adjust these correlations. Anyway, so we have our 100 lineups in, right? And we're just running our defaults. So let's go ahead and run that. So here's the blitz, right? And we'll pull top 150, and here's the 555 milli. So I think we're going to be getting a lot of the chalk, a lot of Chase Brown, yep, a lot of Kamara. And what I'm interested in here is, so David Moore, we're right on the field here. If we played these top 150, we're right on the field on David Moore. And I wanted to see Chuba. So now this is what's interesting to me, right? Chuba, a little under on Chuba, which, as I talked about earlier, I like that. I would probably be lowering this even more, so we could manually set this exposure down to like 10. There you go. So we could do that. But not surprising to me, we're getting a lot of Chase Brown. Against the Steelers defense, it does feel a little more fragile than normal. Steelers defense obviously is very good. But he's got a great role right now. The Bengals clearly like playing him, and people have liked him in best ball and stuff for a couple of years now. So 66% is a lot for playing 150. I'd probably try to reduce that a little bit, but the Sims like it, so it's hard. It's really hard to argue with the math, So let's go in here, and what I wanted to do is first take our. So what I'm going to do is let's go ahead and just open up Google Sheets, and I'm gonna. Let's go ahead and import these. And here. All right. So here is our. We can import this, and it'll take a minute. This is almost done. Cool. This job here, and so another nice thing we could do on the site is we could save our jobs. So here, right, this job here, like this is a great way to kind of keep track of what you were doing. So this was just like a default run, right? Default run and settings. So we can save the note. And now we have this thing saved. So now I always know what this was. And let's see if this is the one with our generated or opto. I want to say this one. Oops. Let me check. Let me check and see if this is the generated or not. So I want to make sure I'm saving the right one. Nope, that was not it. So actually, something worth pointing out here in the 555 on FanDuel, 80 Mitchell popping up here in just 20 lineups. I don't mind it as the kind of the value. And also the other interesting thing here, Anthony Richardson just all over these FanDuel sims. Something else worth noting. We got some Richardson, Taylor, 80 Mitchell. Now the one interesting thing, so like Richardson +3 is probably a little too much. But when you play Richardson and Taylor together, you're getting all the touchdown equity for for the Colts. And if you just think the Colts are gonna score points here, like against the Patriots, I mean, we saw the Dolphins just move the ball at will last week. It's really, I don't hate approaching it that way. Which one was my? Where the hell? Where did I put my my sim here that had all my Jaden Daniels lineups? There they are. Okay. All right. This is the one. 8. Okay. So let's go back into my results. So we can call this my Jaden Daniels naked plus Ridley bring back. So that way, like I was showing earlier, just keep track of what I was doing. As you can see, when I don't do that, then I get confused about what was what. But anyway, so we can go ahead and import that sim file. Bring this up. Come on. We can do it this way. 8 was the one. This is the one. Boom. Oh, did I just create a new? Oh, well, that's fine. That's fine. For the point I'm about to make, it's okay. Let's go ahead and just Insert new sheet. It's going to take a minute. Excuse me. Okay. All right. So this one here, we'll call this my Jaden Sims, whatever, just so I can keep track. And then we'll just call this default on my sheet. So all I want to show here is just on, you can do this in Excel too. You just with Python, whatever. So what I want to see, I want to get rid of these Washington 2s. I want to see all these Jaden Daniels lines that we forced in. How do they perform, right? And specifically, I want to see my optimizer lineups. So let's just go ahead and see these and just get an idea here of how they sim. So if we just look at the average, so some are pretty bad, right? What is this one? Only a 104 projection, which is part of the problem. But if we were to create a pivot table off of this, and let's look at median ROI. Actually, we could just look here, median ROIs. So with our default correlations, remember I didn't change correlations for this. You kind of see they don't sim that well, right? I mean, if we look at just the average of the medians, damn it, why isn't this? Come on, man. Let's go ahead and just do like, where's my ROI sheet? There we go. So let's just add this into my values. All I'm just trying to show is the median. And let's also add another one here. That's the average. So we can see the difference. So just with default correlations, you can see these don't sim very well, right? Well, only negative 23.95. That's with the Ridley bringback. Now, if we were to look at like the default here and just look at all combinations of lineups, let's go ahead and bring this over into my pivot here. So we can look at primary stack as our rows. See, now we have all these lined up, and we can look at our ROIs again. So let's just look at these. Look at our median ROI, our average ROI, and we could also look at projection because projection matters. There we go. So if we just sort on this, to remember how to sort in. Well, okay, let's just do it this way. Let's make a new sheet. Getting kind of over my skis a little bit. Here we go. Okay. So let's go ahead and sort on our median ROI. So if we're just looking at like, what are the stacks that perform the best? Houston 4 stacks and Colts 4 stacks are like simming the best here. So Stroud doubles, like I talked about. My guess is these Houston 4, and actually, let's add one more field to this. Let's add a count. Count unique. There we go. There's a reason why we want to do it this way. So we'll do that, and then we'll just do equals this divided by our sum. There we go. Now we can get an idea of how many lineups actually. Oh. Why did I do that? There we go. Okay, back to this. And let's do percent. Perfect. Okay. So we can see like what the field is actually owning these at, or our projected field is owning these at, right? Just for reference. So let's go ahead and remove our filter and a percent of field. So if we look at this again, whoops. There we go. Okay. So Houston, not much of the field getting to Houston. Only 7 lineups in our generated field. Now remember, we did 5. We did 5 fields, so that's 25,000 unique lineups here, I bet. So if we were to look at our lineup index, 26,000 unique lineups here. So only about 7 of them total were built in all. So like Houston 4, not very high owned. I mean, it's pretty tough for the field to build this kind of lineup. But they sim well, right? Highest median ROI by far. Like, it's interesting, all these other quarterbacks down here, negative ROIs as a median, but these Houston 4 and Colts 4s are sim pretty well. Now, Colts 4s, like I was talking about, that's one where we would actually want to go back in. So, for example, on FanDuel, we go to here. Let's rerun a sim, but we could reset our data so that way we're getting rid of our optimized lineups. Back to FanDuel. Back to our blitz. And let's go ahead and do 80, 10, 10 again. 2. And what we're going to do is do Richardson. And actually, we'll just give him the commies default, right? And what we're going to do is also lower this to 0. We'll say 1.8. And we'll lower this to 0.05. And, there's an argument for Anthony Richardson. He probably negatively correlates with Jonathan Taylor because he can't even throw an underneath route. So you could make this even lower if you wanted to. You can make this a negative. But let's go ahead and just save that as our, let's just call this like a running QBs preset, right? So let's put Richardson, give him this correlation now. He's going to be less correlated with his receivers. We could do it again with Lamar. We could do it with Jaden Daniels as well. So we'll just say for these 3. And now we could run another sim. So we got all that set up. Now, let's go ahead and run another sim. It's going to take about 2 minutes. So we can see what's going to happen here. Like Hurts 4. I didn't touch Hurts, but he's another one probably you'd want to lower correlations on. But like Herbert 4 sim pretty well. Herbert double stacks as well. And remember, this is the 5,000 entry contest, so we can get away with these onslaughts as we've seen, right? These like Lions onslaughts, for example, have hit in these contests, to where we can miss on one of the players in the stack as long as we get all the touchdowns. If Houston scores 40 points against Jacksonville, and let's say, for example, we play Schultz, for example, and he only finishes with 4 catches for 40 yards, but Tank Dell and Nico Collins both get 2 touchdown catches, it's probably going to be okay that we have a triple stack with Stroud in the 5,000 entry contest. So worth noting for that. But let's go ahead and let this finish. And also, let's see. So 4 correlation to NFL. I'm pretty sure they still have this up. It was free. Yeah, so they still have this up. And so you, instead of calculating correlations yourself, you could literally go in here. It's going to take them a minute. But you could go in here into their site. Shout out these guys for doing this. It may not be updated for this season, so it might be moot. But you could go in here and run these correlations for each team individually. So like you could do it for Kyler Murray, and then you could put in those correlations yourself. And that way you're getting a little more exact. So like if we were to look at the Colts, well, you'd want to like deselect some of these. You'd want to only look at 2023. There might be a more updated tool. You might have to build this yourself, but you could definitely do it this way to figure out what your correlations should be for each individual team. Then you could save presets and use it. That's one kind of tool out there that you can use to get these correlations dialed in exactly. And so let's go ahead and download these lineups. And we're going to rename this file so you don't forget. Here, this one was adjusted running QB correlations. Again, just an easy way for you if you're running multiple sims to keep track of what you did. Another thing you could do is you could run a bunch of optimizer jobs with different team stacks and label them so you know. It's a pretty handy little thing we set up that not many people use or even know about, probably. Most people, I assume, just run one sim and call it a day. Ideally, we want you guys to be experimenting as much as possible, so just you feel free to run as many sims as you want. Just you figure out your process, whatever works for you. I think the more you're kind of experimenting with this stuff, the better. And we're working on tools that'll help kind of backtest some of this. The problem is with FanDuel, they won't open up their API, so we can't just get all their contest data in order to do some contests, post-contest sims, but we can do it for DraftKings. We're working on that tool. So that'll be something we can use. So anyway, so this thing just about to finish. Come on. This, as we know it, was adjusted running QB cores. So let's do one more, not a chart. Let's do one more pivot table and just see how our values change. So let's do, we want lineup indexes of value, and we want the count unique. We want sim ROI average and sim ROI median. And then we want primary stack. Boom. Okay. So let's look at these. Now we changed them for Jaden Daniels. So equals divided by this. Okay, and then we're going to change these to percentages. And then we're going to just paste our values in. Okay. So percent of field. Now let's just look at these and see how everybody can just freeze these. Let's see how these changed. So before we were getting these Houston Colts 4s, and now they're kind of simming a little worse. The Colts 4 simming worse since we changed the Richardson correlation. And now some of these Bills ones are actually bubbling up to the top, right? And also these Chargers 3 and 4 stacks, we saw them have success earlier. And they're still simming pretty well. We didn't adjust those correlations, right? Washington 4 simming well interests me. You know, we did adjust correlations there, but it didn't seem to change how well they simmed, which is worth noting, I feel like. But definitely adjusting these hurt these like mega Colts stacks, right? See the Colts, even the Colts 2s here, but where's my Colts 1s? Where's my naked? Where is he? Into one. Oh, my poor Niners down here just getting cooked. There we go. So Richardson naked here just doesn't sim well. It's probably the ownership is really the problem here. And sims a little better when we reduce the correlations, but not much. So naked Richardson lineups seem like they're off the board this week. But it seems like you can kind of like load up on Washington here. I guess Tennessee. And we've seen teams score against Tennessee. So even when we adjusted correlations, Washington 4's ROIs didn't really change much, which is worth noting. I feel like that's definitely a viable way to play this. Just load up on Washington, get all the touchdowns you can. But anyway, so that's just a couple ways you can kind of experiment with different ways to adjust the sims, tweak some values. Another thing you could do when we say we're testing is, let's say, for example, what's a good one? Let's say, for example, we think this game here is going to end up being way over, right? I think this game is going to be like 31-28. We could just boost the quarterbacks here with a thumbs up. And as we see, it adjusts their projection. It also adjusts the projection for everybody else in the game based on our correlations we have set here. So now, like, Drake London projects better. And so this would be like, you are testing, you think this game is way undervalued, and you just want to see what happens if you boost everybody's correlation. You could then run a sim like this, test out and see how do my Chargers 3s sim once I adjust Herbert up, right? And I'm assuming, obviously, our ROIs will be boosted a ton. But yeah, so another way you could experiment. Another thing you do is just like boost boost a projection on its own. So I could just boost Jamar Chase here. I could also boost his standard deviation, give him more variance, gives him way more upside if I did that. And just see like now, if I think Chase here is like the big play of the week, how would that change which lineup sim well, right? Well, he's 9,300. So if I give him this floor, I'm assuming then our cheaper quarterbacks are going to sim a lot better because we're going to find lineups that are forcing Chase in, right? Like Cousins might sim better. So that's just another thing you can do. Another thing worth noting is when we reset these boosts, we're not resetting them back to exactly where they were. We're actually just changing them based on the correlation values in here, or our default correlation values. So that's why we don't have them match up exactly to what they were a second ago. But anyway, so that's just a couple ways you can experiment and kind of look at the results in the sims and decide what makes sense to you, what doesn't. If you have, let's say, I have theories about which I talked about how I think this Houston stack before when I was talking earlier about the games. I was talking about how I kind of like getting to Stroud and Collins here, and I think you can also play Dell, and I think you can overload on this Texans offense against Jacksonville, and that does sim well just with our defaults, right? It does sim really well, and so that's definitely something I'm going to be looking at here in this 2-2-2. And again, we can do that. We could set for the $15 on FanDuel. We could do it for all these contests. Now, once we get up into like the 70,000s, like this contest here, this dive, or the main $15 with 80,000, these ones you're gonna want to. You can leave it 50,000, but you're gonna want to turn our generations down. You also could set this lower and turn this up, and so right, you're basically just cutting the sim time way down when you only do 10,000. And so you could get more lineup generations, and there's lots of reasons why you might want to do that. On a short slate, you might want to just generate as many lineups as you can. And like on a showdown, for example, you could set this. I showed this the other day. You could set this down to like 1,000 and just run a ton of generations, and you could just get a giant lineup pool. Then you could work off of. Let's say you don't like. Let's say for whatever reason you don't like the outputs of the sims. You just want to get a bunch of lineups. Then you could just do this. Ignore the results from the sims, and you could just kind of do some filtering on your own, give it using the outputs in our sims. So like you could ignore the ROIs, and you could still look at projection, field projection. You could look at salary, the stat combinations, the geo mean, expected dupes, all that stuff. So you don't even have to use the sim outputs, right? The actual like ROIs. You could just generate a big pool of lineups for yourself, and then sort them however way you want, right? You could just you could set your lineup score. You could set your lineup score here to 0 on ROI, and you only care about, let's say you want to do like 60-40 on projection ownership, and now our lineup score would then only be sorted on your projection ownership. We wouldn't even look at the sim values to give you a score for the lineups, right? So you could set your own heuristics here. I think we're going to make ceiling another one you can use here, because ceiling is actually the simmed. Ceiling is the max simmed value for each lineup. So like across all 50,000, I guess 250,000 sims, depends how many generations these lineups were parts of. This is the max score that we simulated, so you can get an idea of that. So like right here, this lineup had a 263 max 260 ceiling, but our actual top lineup by lineup score was a 243. So long story short, and you can see why this one might have had a lower. If we go back down here and look at our 263 lineup, it's a Houston double stack, and we're not really running Rams here, but we're actually kind of capping upside a little bit when we stack up on this Tampa Carolina game, right? This 3-3 here only had a ceiling of 243, and this Houston 3 here with the Ridley bringback had a or Ridley's not a bringback, excuse me, Ingram bringback had a 263 ceiling. So another way you kind of filter these down is look at ceiling. Long story short, just a lot of ways you can use our tool. We try to make it as customizable as possible for people. It does mean that there's a barrier to entry in terms of learning how to use everything and kind of like adapting it to your needs, but we're intentionally keeping this as adaptable as possible. We're not forcing you to have specific fields like other sites do. We're not forcing you to sim things a certain way. We're not forcing you to use the distributions that we've simulated ourselves. Everything is kind of up to you. And that means there's margin for error when you're using our tools, but it also means that if you know what you're doing and you're comfortable with our tool, you can really take advantage of it compared to other sites. So food for thought. Food for thought there. Not much else on my end. I'm gonna jump off. I gotta start getting ready for NBA tonight on FanDuel. So any last questions here from anybody about how to use the tools? Anything that you want me to show you before I jump off? Excuse me. All right, going. Oops. Let's see. Anything else? Yep, no problem. Coolers. Yeah, let's get it this week. I'm really excited about this slate. I mean, famous last words, but I really feel good about this slate. I think this is a really, really fun. I think there's going to be high scoring, and I think there's a lot of ways to get different and still get good lineups out there. I mean, just look at these Josh Allen and Snow game lineups, for example. That's a really fun way to play this. You kind of have you can still hit the nuts. You're waiting for that Sunday night game. So good luck, everybody. If you need us, we're always available on Discord. Projections are up now. I have them up on the site now. And I'll have probably one more update tomorrow. Oh, not probably. I will have one more update tomorrow morning at about probably hour and a half before lock once we get final inactives in. So, yeah, they should be up. If you're not seeing them up, let me know, and I can get them up for you. Yeah, with that, everybody, thanks for tuning in. Appreciate the support as always. And good luck this week. And let's go Niners. Please save the season, Niners. Please. All right. See you, everybody.